This. You're standing at cruise security watching a TSA-style agent pull your brand new smart suitcase out of the scanning area and tell you it's completely prohibited. The built-in GPS tracker and lithium battery that you paid extra for specifically for cruise travel security, banned as of 2025. You spent $400 on that luggage set thinking it would help you keep track of your bags on vacation, and now it's getting confiscated because you didn't know about a policy change that was buried in a cruise line email most passengers never opened. This exact scenario is happening to thousands of cruisers this year because cruise lines have quietly updated their prohibited items lists with restrictions that are catching even veteran passengers completely off guard. We're talking about everyday items that were perfectly acceptable to bring last year, but are now instant confiscations that could derail your vacation before you even board the ship. I've spent the last 6 weeks analyzing updated prohibited items policies from every major cruise line, talking to port security personnel, and tracking confiscation patterns at embarkation ports across the country. What I discovered will shock you. Some of these new bans make legitimate sense from a safety perspective. Others seem specifically designed to force you to spend more money on overpriced ship alternatives. And a few are so unexpected that even cruise ship employees are confused about enforcing them consistently. Today, I'm revealing the 10 most important items that cruise lines have newly banned in 2025, why they're suddenly prohibited, and what you should pack instead to avoid having your vacation ruined at the security checkpoint. Before we dive into these vacation-killing restrictions, hit that subscribe button, because these policies are changing constantly, and missing an update could cost you hundreds of dollars in confiscated items. Ban number 1. Smart luggage with built-in batteries and tracking devices. This is the restriction that's catching the most passengers off guard in 2025. Cruise lines have banned smart suitcases with built-in lithium batteries, GPS tracking, electronic locks, and wireless connectivity features. Yes, that includes popular brands like Away, Raiden, and Samsonite smart luggage collections that travelers specifically bought for cruise vacations. The official reason is fire safety and cybersecurity concerns. Lithium batteries can overheat in cargo holds, and wireless tracking devices allegedly interfere with ship navigation systems. But here's what's really happening. Cruise lines are tired of dealing with passengers who use smart luggage tracking to complain about delayed or mishandled bags. Instead of improving their baggage handling, they've decided to ban the technology that exposes their problems. I watched security confiscate 6 smart suitcases during embarkation on my last Princess cruise. Families who had invested in expensive luggage sets, specifically for cruise tracking, were forced to surrender them or miss their sailing. One couple from Michigan had matching Away suitcases worth $800 total. Security offered them 2 choices: abandon the luggage or take a later cruise. They chose to lose their bags rather than lose their vacation. The enforcement is creating chaos at ports. Some security checkpoints allow smart luggage if you remove the battery. Others ban the entire suitcase even with batteries removed. The rules vary between cruise lines and even between ships in the same fleet, leaving passengers guessing about what's actually acceptable. But what most travelers don't realize is that this ban extends far beyond obvious smart luggage. Ban number 2. Personal Wi-Fi routers and networking equipment. Cruise lines have dramatically expanded their definition of prohibited networking equipment to include personal Wi-Fi routers, signal boosters, satellite communication devices, and even some types of mobile hotspots. This new category specifically targets passengers trying to bypass expensive ship internet packages. Royal Caribbean quietly added satellite dishes, routers, and other networking equipment to their cybersecurity prohibited items list, and other cruise lines quickly followed with similar restrictions. The official justification is preventing interference with ship communication systems and cybersecurity protection. But the real motivation is crystal clear: protecting their lucrative internet revenue streams that can cost $15 to $30 per day per device. Mark from Texas learned this lesson the hard way when his personal travel router was confiscated at Carnival Security. He'd used the same device on 4 previous cruises without any issues, bringing it specifically to share internet between his family's devices and save money on multiple Wi-Fi packages. Security not only took his $80 router, but threatened to flag his reservation if he tried to bring similar equipment again. The ban extends to equipment most passengers wouldn't even consider networking devices. Portable Wi-Fi extenders, USB Wi-Fi adapters, and even some advanced phone signal boosters are getting confiscated under these expanded networking restrictions. The enforcement varies wildly between ports, creating confusion for passengers who thought they were following the rules. But here's where it gets really sneaky. The timing of these bans coincided perfectly with cruise lines raising their internet package prices and reducing the number of devices included in basic plans. What used to be a family-friendly internet option now requires multiple expensive packages unless you're willing to pay premium prices for unlimited device plans. The message is clear: use our overpriced internet or don't get connected at all. Ban number 3, large, wheeled coolers and insulated bags. Cruise lines have implemented strict new size restrictions on coolers that are devastating families who rely on these items for shore excursions and poolside drinks. The new limits are typically 12 by 12 by 12 inches or smaller, which eliminates virtually every standard family cooler and large insulated bag on the market. This ban is purely revenue-driven, and cruise lines aren't even trying to hide it. They want you buying their overpriced beverages instead of bringing your own drinks and coolers that could last your entire vacation. The size restriction is calculated to be just small enough to prevent meaningful beverage storage, while still allowing cruise lines to claim they permit coolers. Jessica from California discovered this restriction the hard way when her wheeled cooler was confiscated at Norwegian security. She'd brought the same cooler on 5 previous cruises, using it for beach days in Cozumel and keeping drinks cold by the pool. The cooler measured 14 by 16 by 10 inches, just slightly over the new size limits. Security offered no alternatives, no storage options, and no refunds. Her $120 cooler went straight into the confiscation pile. The enforcement includes actual measuring devices at security checkpoints. If your cooler is even 1 inch over the size limit in any dimension, it's getting confiscated regardless of what's inside it. I watched them measure and confiscate a family's cooler that was 13 inches wide, just 1 inch over the limit. The family had packed snacks and drinks for their kids, planning to save money on expensive ship refreshments. But here's the most frustrating part. Many cruise lines sell large coolers and insulated bags in their online shops for shore excursions, then confiscate similar items that passengers bring from home. The identical cooler that gets confiscated at security is available for purchase in the ship's gift shop at 3 times the price you'd pay at Target. Ban number 4, candles, wax melts, and scented warmers. This restriction is hitting passengers who want to create a cozy atmosphere in their cabins or bring special occasion items for celebrations. Cruise lines have banned all types of candles, including battery-operated fake candles with heating elements, wax melts, essential oil diffusers with heating components, and portable wax warmers. The fire safety reasoning is legitimate, but the timing is suspicious. This ban coincided perfectly with cruise lines expanding their expensive cabin aromatherapy services and premium scented amenity packages. That $15 candle you plan to light for your anniversary dinner? Confiscated. The wax melts you brought to make your interior cabin smell better? Gone forever. Amanda from Ohio packed special birthday candles for her daughter's Sweet 16 celebration during their Disney cruise. Security confiscated not just the candles, but also the portable wax warmer she brought to create a spa-like atmosphere in their cabin. The family ended up spending $80 on overpriced scented amenities from guest services to salvage their celebration plans. The enforcement extends to items passengers never considered candles. Battery-powered LED candles with warming features, essential oil diffusers that heat the oils, and even some types of scented sachets with heating elements are getting confiscated. Security uses specialized detection equipment that can identify heating elements and flammable materials even in wrapped packages. But here's what's really frustrating passengers. The ship's spa offers the exact same aromatherapy services and scented experiences that these confiscated items would provide, except at premium prices. A simple essential oil diffusion service in your cabin costs $25 per day, while the wax melts that got confiscated cost $8 for the entire week. Ban number 5, professional camera gimbals and stabilizing equipment. Even if you're not bringing a drone, which have been banned for years, cruise lines are now confiscating camera stabilizers, motorized gimbals, and professional photography equipment under expanded drone-related policies. This includes handheld camera stabilizers, action camera gimbals, and even some advanced tripods with motorized features. The logic is guilt by association. Security assumes that if you have professional stabilizing equipment, you might have smuggled drone components on board, or you're planning to acquire a drone at ports. It's affecting legitimate content creators, travel photographers, and passengers who simply want to capture steady vacation footage with their phones and cameras. David from New York, a travel blogger, had his $350 DJI camera gimbal confiscated during celebrity security screening. He had no drone parts, and no intention of flying anything. But the motorized gimbal was classified as drone-related equipment under the new policies. Security refused to consider that it was legitimate photography gear, even when David showed them his travel blog and explained his profession. The ban is surprisingly broad and inconsistent. Some cruise lines confiscate any device with motors or stabilization technology. Others allow manual stabilizers but ban motorized versions. A few permit gimbals under certain size limits but define those limits differently. Even professional photographers are struggling to understand what equipment they can safely bring. But here's where it gets really arbitrary. The same technology that gets confiscated in passenger luggage is often used by the ship's own photography staff and entertainment crew. Those professional videos and photos you see of ship activities, they're shot with the exact same stabilizing equipment that passengers can't bring aboard. Ban number 6, personal water filtration devices and purification systems. The newest and most surprising restriction affects water bottles with built-in filtration, UV water purifiers, and portable water treatment devices. This includes popular brands like LifeStraw bottles, Breda filtered water bottles, SteriPen UV purifiers, and camping water purification equipment that health-conscious travelers rely on. The official reasoning is that these devices might indicate distrust of the ship's water system or suggest plans to treat water from questionable sources during shore excursions. But the real motivation is protecting beverage sales and preventing passengers from treating tap water instead of buying bottled water at ship prices. Those $4 bottles of water from room service become a lot less appealing when passengers can filter unlimited tap water for free. Maria from Arizona packed her trusted LifeStraw water bottle for her Mediterranean cruise, planning to use it during shore excursions in ports where water quality varies. Security confiscated the bottle even though it was empty, and she explained she only planned to use it on land. They told her that any water treatment device suggests she doesn't trust ship facilities and violates health department protocols. The enforcement is catching international passengers especially hard. Travelers from countries where filtered water bottles are standard travel equipment are discovering these items prohibited for the first time. Security is specifically trained to identify filtration systems, and they're confiscating devices even when passengers explain they're for shore excursion use only. But here's the ironic twist. The ship's gift shops sell bottled water at premium prices, while the medical center stocks water purification tablets for passengers with stomach issues. The same water treatment concept that gets your personal equipment confiscated is available for purchase once you're on board, just at much higher prices. Ban number 7, Bluetooth speakers over 85 decibel limits. This restriction is more complex than the outright speaker bans some cruise lines implemented. Multiple cruise lines now use decibel meters to test portable speakers at security, confiscating any device capable of producing sound over 85 decibels. The problem is that most popular Bluetooth speakers exceed this limit, even compact models that seem harmless. Those JBL Flip speakers, Bose SoundLink devices, and even mid-range Amazon Echo speakers that passengers bring for cabin entertainment are getting tested and confiscated. The 85 decibel limit sounds reasonable until you realize it's quieter than normal conversation in a busy restaurant. Most Bluetooth speakers are designed to be heard outdoors or in larger spaces, which means they naturally exceed cruise line sound limits. Kevin from Florida had his JBL Charge speaker confiscated during Royal Caribbean security screening. He brought the same speaker on 8 previous cruises, using it quietly in his cabin for background music and podcasts. Security tested the maximum volume capability and determined it violated the new decibel restrictions, even though Kevin never used it at full volume. The testing process is creating massive delays at embarkation. Security uses handheld decibel meters to test each speaker, playing audio at maximum volume regardless of passenger protests about noise. This testing happens in the middle of crowded security areas, creating chaos and embarrassment for passengers whose devices get confiscated in front of hundreds of other travelers. But here's what's really infuriating passengers. The ship's pool deck and entertainment venues regularly play music well over 85 decibels. The same volume levels that get passenger speakers confiscated are exceeded by ship sound systems throughout the vessel. It's a double standard that feels more about controlling passenger behavior than actual noise management. Ban number 8, CBD products and hemp-derived items. This restriction isn't entirely new, but cruise lines have dramatically expanded their definition of prohibited CBD and hemp products in 2025, catching passengers who thought they were following the rules. Even items that are completely legal in your home state and contain zero THC are now getting passengers into serious trouble with cruise security. The expanded ban includes CBD lotions and topical creams, hemp protein powders and supplements, CBD-infused gummies marketed as legal wellness products, hemp oil capsules and tinctures, and even some cosmetic products containing hemp seed oil. Security is using advanced drug detection equipment that can identify these substances even in processed forms or mixed products. Linda from Colorado had her legal CBD arthritis cream confiscated and was threatened with being banned from future cruises for attempting to bring controlled substances on board. The cream was prescribed by her doctor, legal in all 50 states, and contained no psychoactive ingredients. But cruise security treated it like she was smuggling illegal drugs, even calling port authorities to verify she wouldn't face criminal charges. The international nature of cruising means these items are treated as controlled substances regardless of their legal status in the United States. Cruise lines are taking extreme precautions to avoid legal issues in foreign ports where hemp products might be completely illegal. They'd rather confiscate legitimate medical products than risk international incidents. But here's the confusing part. Some cruise line medical centers stock CBD alternative products for sale to passengers with chronic pain or anxiety issues. The same therapeutic benefits that get your personal CBD products confiscated are available for purchase through ship medical services at prescription medication prices. Ban number 9, surge protectors and power strips. This ban is hitting tech-savvy passengers particularly hard because cruise cabins typically have very limited electrical outlets. Cruise lines have prohibited surge protectors, power strips, and extension cords under expanded electrical safety policies, leaving passengers struggling to charge multiple devices in cabins designed decades ago. The official reasoning is preventing electrical overloads and fire hazards in older ship electrical systems. But here's what passengers are discovering. The ban conveniently forces you to rent additional outlets and charging stations from guest services, or upgrade to higher cabin categories that include more built-in USB ports and electrical connections. Tom from Michigan packed a basic surge protector for his family's balcony cabin, planning to charge phones, tablets, and cameras simultaneously. Security confiscated the device during Norwegian screening, explaining that any power distribution equipment violates electrical safety protocols. His family of 4 ended up fighting over 2 available outlets for the entire 7-day cruise. The enforcement targets even the most basic electrical accessories. Simple outlet multipliers without surge protection, USB charging hubs that plug into wall outlets, and basic extension cords are all getting confiscated under the electrical equipment ban. Security doesn't distinguish between high-powered electrical devices and simple charging accessories. But here's the revenue connection. Guest services now rent approved charging stations for $15 per day, and higher cabin categories market additional outlets as premium amenities. Same electrical capacity that gets your surge protector confiscated is available as an upgrade or rental once you're trapped on the ship with no alternatives. Ban number 10. Personal coffee makers and heating elements. Coffee lovers, this restriction is going to hurt your wallet and your morning routine. Cruise lines have expanded their bans on electrical heating devices to include small personal coffee makers, travel kettles, immersion heaters, and even some types of coffee cup warmers that passengers rely on for their daily caffeine fix. The fire safety reasoning is legitimate since heating elements pose real risks in cabin environments. But the timing is incredibly suspicious, coming right after cruise lines raised their specialty coffee prices and started charging for in-room coffee and mini-cabin categories. Those free coffee makers that used to be standard in most cabins, now they're premium amenities in higher-priced staterooms only. Robert from Oregon had his compact travel coffee maker confiscated during Princess security screening. He'd been bringing the same device for 6 years, making morning coffee in his cabin to avoid $5 specialty drinks from ship cafes. Security explained that any device with heating elements violates the new electrical safety protocols, forcing him to pay ship prices for his daily coffee throughout the cruise. The ban extends to seemingly innocent items that passengers never considered heating devices. USB-powered coffee cup warmers, battery-operated milk frothers with heating elements, and even some types of travel food warmers are getting confiscated under the expanded heating device restrictions. Security uses thermal detection equipment that can identify heating components even in small electronic devices. But here's what's really frustrating passengers. The ship's cabin service offers premium coffee delivery for $8 per pot, and specialty coffee shops charge $4 to $6 per drink. The same coffee-making capability that gets your personal equipment confiscated is available as an expensive service once you're on board, with no alternatives. The pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. Every banned item has a convenient ship-based replacement available at premium prices. Looking at all these restrictions together, a clear pattern emerges that has nothing to do with passenger safety. Cruise lines are systematically banning items that either compete with their onboard revenue streams or create operational challenges they don't want to manage. The safety justifications are sometimes legitimate, but often seem secondary to pure financial motivations. Banning smart luggage stops passenger complaints about baggage handling. Prohibiting networking equipment protects expensive internet packages. Confiscating coolers eliminates beverage competition. Restricting coffee makers drives specialty drink sales. The list goes on, but the message is crystal clear. Cruise lines want you completely dependent on their overpriced onboard alternatives. Here's what smart cruisers need to do to protect themselves in this new restriction environment. Check prohibited items lists within 2 weeks of sailing, not when you originally booked months ago. These policies change frequently and often without adequate notice to passengers. When in doubt about any item, leave it at home. The financial risk of confiscation usually outweighs the convenience of bringing questionable items. Pack smart alternatives that serve the same purpose but avoid the new restrictions. Instead of one large cooler, bring multiple small insulated bags that meet size requirements. Instead of aerosol products, choose pump or squeeze bottle versions. Instead of high-capacity power banks, bring multiple smaller ones that stay under the limits. Consider purchasing restricted items at your first port of call instead of bringing them from home. Many Caribbean and Mediterranean ports sell identical products without the transportation restrictions. You might pay slightly more than home prices, but it's still cheaper than losing expensive items to confiscation. The future of cruise restrictions is trending toward more limitations, not fewer. As ships get larger and passenger management becomes more complex, expect cruise lines to ban additional items rather than finding solutions that work for passengers.
The industry is under increasing pressure from port authorities and international regulations, forcing them to adopt the most restrictive policies to cover all destinations.
The bottom line is that the 2025 updates of prohibited items lists represent the most significant changes to cruise packing in recent years. Items that were perfectly acceptable last year are now vacation-ruining confiscations. The key to successful cruising is staying informed and adapting to these new financial realities. The days of showing up to a cruise with whatever you want are officially over. Modern cruising requires careful research, strategic packing, and acceptance that you'll pay premium prices for items you used to bring from home. These restrictions aren't making cruising safer or better for passengers. They're making it more complicated and expensive while protecting cruise line profit margins. Have you had items confiscated due to these new 2025 restrictions? What surprised you most about these policy changes? Share your experiences in the comments below because other cruisers need to know what to expect. Don't forget to subscribe for updates on cruise policies and restrictions because these lists change frequently, and staying informed could save you hundreds of dollars in confiscated items. Until next time, pack smart and cruise smarter. What if I told you I spent 196 days living on the world's largest cruise ship, survived one of the decade's biggest hurricanes, witnessed 2 onboard fires, got caught in a bomb scare that had the entire crew searching every inch of the vessel, and somehow managed to make money while doing it? This wasn't some luxury vacation. I was working as crew, sleeping in a room smaller than most people's closets, and I discovered secrets about the cruise industry that most passengers never see. During those 6 months floating between Caribbean islands, I learned exactly how much extra money tourists really spend on these floating cities, compared the cheapest cabin to the most expensive suite, experienced what happens when you almost miss your ship and have to chase it down by helicopter, and figured out exactly who should never book a cruise and why it might be the worst vacation idea for them. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. While passengers were spending hundreds of dollars daily on extras, I was actually earning money in ways that surprised even me. The scale of these ships is beyond what most people imagine, and what happens behind the scenes is far more intense than any passenger realizes. The Harmony of the Seas, where I lived and worked, is essentially a floating city that stretches 362 meters. That's like 3 football fields lined up end to end, 17 decks high with 2,747 cabins housing up to 6,700 guests, plus 2,200 crew members. But Royal Caribbean didn't stop there. They've now launched the Icon of the Seas, which is 3 meters longer and packs 7,600 passengers into what's basically a floating theme park. These aren't your grandfather's cruise ships. We're talking about vessels with their own zip lines, ice skating rinks, surf simulators, and even carousels. The propellers alone are 6 meters tall. Imagine 2 giraffes sitting on top of each other, and that's just one propeller blade. The entire ship weighs as much as 113,000 Mercedes C-Class cars floating on the ocean. But here's what the marketing brochures don't tell you about these megaships. Just this year, a passenger was injured on Icon of the Seas when a water slides glass panel malfunctioned and broke during operation. Another recent cruise saw over 140 passengers fall ill, with a mysterious outbreak that required CDC investigation. When you pack nearly 8,000 people into a confined space, things can go wrong fast, and the scale of these problems matches the scale of the ships. Royal Caribbean has created a fleet of these giants, launching a new record breaker almost every year. It's like they're in an arms race with themselves, each ship slightly bigger than the last. But what passengers discover once they're on board is that bigger doesn't always mean better, and that's just the beginning of what I learned during my 6 months at sea. Here's the financial reality that cruise lines don't advertise up front. While you might book a 7-night Caribbean cruise for $665, that's just your entry ticket to a floating casino designed to extract every possible dollar from your wallet. The average passenger spends between $52 to $89 extra per day. That's nearly $500 additional for a week-long cruise, and I watched people spend far more than that average. Internet packages cost $16 to $30 daily per person. Unlimited alcohol runs $56 to $105 per day. A single cocktail will set you back $10 to $15. But those are just the obvious expenses. What most passengers don't realize until they're on board is that even basic services come with fees. Gratuities alone now range from $14.50 to $25 per person daily. That's mandatory, not optional, despite what they tell you at booking. I witnessed passengers dropping hundreds at art auctions, buying diamonds in onboard jewelry stores, and paying $800 fines for inappropriate behavior in lifeboats. Yes, that actually happened. The specialty restaurants, spa treatments, shore excursions, and casino all have one purpose: turning your vacation into their profit center. But here's where it gets interesting from the crew perspective. While passengers were hemorrhaging money, I was earning it. My salary was $1,900 monthly plus bonuses, which might sound modest until you realize everything is provided: housing, food, entertainment. Meanwhile, housekeeping staff earn around $800 monthly. Waiters make $1,300, and dancers pull in $3,000 to $5,000. At the top, the captain earns $30,000 to $40,000 monthly, and the chief engineer commands $20,000. The beautiful irony? While working as entertainment staff, I was actually making additional income through tips and special event bonuses that passengers were paying for. They were spending money to have fun, and I was getting paid to help them do it. But what I discovered about money on these ships was nothing compared to what I learned when Mother Nature decided to test our floating city's limits. Living through one of the decade's most powerful hurricanes while trapped on a cruise ship gives you a completely different perspective on these floating cities. When the storm hit, our massive ship, all 236,000 tons of it, was tossed around like a bathtub toy. The stabilization systems that usually keep passengers from feeling seasick were pushed beyond their limits. Furniture wasn't just sliding around, it was launching across rooms. But hurricanes weren't the only crisis we faced. During my contract, I witnessed 2 separate fires break out on board. The first started in a passenger area, and watching 2,200 crew members spring into action was both impressive and terrifying. Every crew member has specific emergency roles. Some handle evacuation routes, others manage firefighting equipment, and everyone else keeps passengers calm while internally panicking about being miles from land with nowhere to run. The most unsettling incident happened when we received a bomb threat. The entire ship went into lockdown mode, and every single crew member had to systematically search their assigned areas. We're talking about inspecting every corner, every closet, every storage area of a ship the size of a small town. The source turned out to be a passenger who had isolated himself in his cabin for 6 days, posting strange videos but never leaving his room. When he finally disembarked in Mexico and didn't return, we searched his cabin and found nothing dangerous, but the hours of terror were very real. These aren't isolated incidents either. Just recently, over 140 passengers fell ill on another Royal Caribbean cruise, requiring CDC investigation into what caused the mysterious outbreak. When you're dealing with nearly 8,000 people in an enclosed environment, any health issue spreads fast, and any safety concern affects everyone on board. What passengers don't realize is that crew members drill for these emergencies constantly, sometimes 3 times per week. We practice evacuating 6,700 guests into lifeboats that hold 370 people each, And let me tell you, those drills feel very different when you're actually living through a real emergency at sea. But these intense experiences were just part of daily life in the hidden world below deck that passengers never see. Welcome to Deck Zero, the crew area that exists in a parallel universe beneath the passenger decks. My living quarters were smaller than most people's walk-in closets. 2 crew members share a room that's literally 1 meter wide when you stretch your arms out. There's a tiny TV, a mini fridge, a phone, and a shower so compact you have to choose between washing your hair or moving your elbows. But here's what's fascinating about crew life. We had our own secret society with 2,200 people from dozens of countries. Filipinos, Indians, Romanians, Jamaicans, Indonesians, all working together in this floating United Nations. During International Food Days, crew members would cook traditional dishes from their home countries and share them with everyone. The camaraderie was incredible, partly because we were all surviving the same cramped conditions together. The work schedule is brutal, often 7 days a week for months at a time. The Royal Caribbean knows this, so they throw crew parties that passengers never hear about. Picture this. After the guests go to sleep, the crew areas transform. There are dance parties, karaoke nights, and social gatherings in spaces that during the day are just the functional work areas. I've seen off-duty crew members taking Instagram photos and dramatic poses on Deck Zero, channeling their inner DiCaprio while surrounded by industrial pipes and safety equipment. The most surreal part was watching our captain, Johnny, walk around the ship with a parrot on his shoulder like some modern-day pirate. This man was responsible for navigating a floating city worth hundreds of millions of dollars, making split-second decisions during emergencies, and maintaining the safety of nearly 9,000 people, all while his pet parrot squawked commands from his shoulder. The crew dining area stays open almost 24 hours because people are working around the clock. You'll find exhausted housekeepers grabbing midnight snacks next to entertainers still in stage makeup, while engineers covered in grease sit beside spa workers in pristine uniforms. It's this hidden ecosystem that keeps the passenger experience seamless, but the contrast between crew reality and passenger luxury is stark. What's even more interesting is how this floating city operates when it reaches those picture-perfect Caribbean destinations that look nothing like the marketing materials suggest. Royal Caribbean doesn't just dock at random Caribbean ports. They own entire islands, and there's a brilliant business strategy behind it. Perfect Beach at Coco Cay in the Bahamas and Labadee in Haiti aren't authentic Caribbean experiences. They're carefully engineered profit centers designed to look like paradise, while keeping every dollar spent on the island flowing back to Royal Caribbean. When we docked at these private islands, I watched passengers rush off the ship, excited to explore authentic Caribbean culture, only to find American-style water parks, zip lines, and beach bars serving overpriced cocktails. Coco Cay even has the tallest water slide in North America because apparently what people really want when visiting the Bahamas is to pay extra for attractions they could find at any Six Flags. But here's where the time pressure creates real problems. Most port stops last only 8 to 10 hours, and passengers are constantly watching the clock. You dock, rush through an excursion, grab lunch, maybe shop for souvenirs, and then it's time to sprint back to the ship. Miss the departure time, and you're stranded until you can catch up at the next port at your own expense. I almost became one of those stranded passengers myself. During a stop in Mexico, I lost track of time exploring Tulum's ancient ruins. When I realized the ship was leaving in 10 minutes and I was still 20 minutes away from the port, panic set in. The thought of chasing down a massive cruise ship by helicopter actually crossed my mind. And yes, people do pay $200 to $300 for emergency flights to catch their ship at the next port. I barely made it back, but the experience taught me why those ship horns sound so urgent when they're calling passengers back. The irony is that these rushing, crowded port experiences often leave passengers feeling like they've barely scratched the surface of each destination. You get Instagram photos and souvenir t-shirts, but you miss the actual culture, food, and people that make these places special. It's Caribbean tourism on fast forward, designed more for the cruise line schedule than for meaningful travel experiences. And speaking of things that aren't quite what they seem, let me tell you about the type of passengers who should absolutely avoid booking these mega ship experiences. If you're dreaming of a romantic getaway with quiet dinners and peaceful sunsets, mega ship cruising will crush those dreams faster than a hurricane hits the Caribbean. Picture this: 8,000 people competing for deck space, pool chairs, buffet lines, and elevators. Finding tranquility on these floating theme parks is like trying to meditate at Disney World during spring break. The noise level alone will shock you. These ships are designed around families with children, which means screaming kids in pools, teenagers running through hallways at midnight, and parents arguing about which overpriced excursion to book next. If you're seeking that serene ocean experience you see in cruise commercials, you'll instead find yourself surrounded by splash zones, arcade sounds, and the constant chatter of thousands of conversations in dozens of languages. Internet connectivity is another crushing reality. Despite paying $16 to $30 daily for Wi-Fi, you're sharing bandwidth with thousands of other users trying to post their vacation photos simultaneously. Video calls home become pixelated disasters, work emails take forever to send, and streaming anything is basically impossible. For digital nomads or anyone needing reliable internet, these ships are floating dead zones. But the real killer for many passengers is the hidden fee avalanche that starts the moment you step on board. That gratuity charge I mentioned? It's now automatic and ranges up to $25 per person daily. Specialty dining costs extra even though you already paid for food. Want to reserve deck chairs or priority boarding? More fees. Even printing your photos from onboard photographers comes with charges. Passengers regularly discover their all-inclusive cruise has doubled in cost by the final day. The most heartbreaking passengers I encountered were elderly couples who booked these cruises thinking they'd found an affordable vacation, only to realize they couldn't afford the additional costs that make the experience enjoyable. They'd sit in their windowless interior cabins while other passengers enjoyed specialty restaurants and shore excursions they couldn't budget for. Here's the truth. Megaship cruising works best for families with disposable income who want theme park entertainment floating between tropical destinations. If you're looking for cultural immersion, authentic local experiences, romantic atmosphere, or budget-friendly travel, you'll leave feeling frustrated and financially drained. But for those who do fit the cruise demographic and have money to burn, these floating cities offer experiences you literally cannot find anywhere else on Earth. After 196 days of living this floating city lifestyle, would I go back? Absolutely. But only as a paying passenger, never again as crew. Working on a cruise ship taught me that there's a massive difference between experiencing these vessels as entertainment and surviving them as a workplace. The crew schedule is relentless, the living conditions are tough, and watching thousands of passengers have fun while you're responsible for their safety and entertainment can be mentally exhausting. But here's the unexpected twist. That cruise ship experience completely changed my career trajectory. Spending 6 months communicating in English daily with passengers from around the world dramatically improved my language skills. Within months of returning, I started receiving collaboration offers from major international brands. Companies like Porsche reached out for partnerships that never would have happened without that cruise ship communication experience. The connections I made during those 196 days extended far beyond the ship itself. I met passengers who became business contacts, crew members who introduced me to opportunities in their home countries, and industry insiders who shared knowledge about hospitality and entertainment that I use in my work today. Sometimes the most unexpected adventures lead to the most valuable outcomes. So here's my final advice. If you have the budget and the right expectations, book that cruise. Just understand what you're actually buying. It's not a peaceful ocean retreat or an authentic cultural journey. You're paying for a floating entertainment complex with themed restaurants, Broadway-style shows, and Instagram-worthy moments between tropical destinations. Some people absolutely love this formula and cruise 15 times or more. Others try it once and realize it's completely wrong for their travel style. The beauty of these massive ships is that they've created something entirely new in travel floating cities that offer experiences impossible anywhere else on Earth. Whether that appeals to you depends entirely on what you're seeking from your vacation. But whatever you decide, don't be afraid to take risks, try new experiences, and chase adventures that push you outside your comfort zone. Sometimes the most unplanned journeys teach you the most about yourself and open doors you never expected to find. If you've been cruising for more than 15 years, you've witnessed something that today's passengers will never experience. The cruise industry has quietly erased dozens of features that once made sailing feel truly magical. Some changes happened overnight after tragic incidents. Others disappeared so gradually that most people didn't even notice until they were gone forever. But veteran cruisers, they're still heartbroken about what we've lost. What I'm about to show you will make you realize just how dramatically cruising has transformed. These aren't just small changes. These are entire experiences that have vanished from the seas, and most of them are never coming back. Picture this. It's nearly midnight, and you stumble upon what looks like an art gallery that somehow ended up in the dining room. Towering ice sculptures of dolphins and ships glisten under soft lighting. Elaborate butter carvings shaped like roses and swans sit next to fruit displays that took master chefs 6 hours to arrange. The chocolate fountain centerpiece is surrounded by desserts sculpted into miniature cruise ships, complete with intricate details that make you question whether you should eat them or photograph them. This was the Midnight Buffet, and it was absolutely spectacular. Every major cruise line offered these elaborate late-night spreads well into the 2000s. The prep work started at dawn, with teams of culinary artists spending entire shifts crafting displays that would only be seen for a few hours. Ice carvers worked with chainsaws and chisels, creating massive sculptures that would slowly melt throughout the night, adding an almost poetic element to the experience. But here's what most passengers never realized about these midnight masterpieces. The cruise lines were hemorrhaging money on them. A single midnight buffet could cost upwards of $15,000 in labor and ingredients, and surveys showed that less than 20% of passengers actually attended them. The elaborate displays were photographed more than they were eaten, leading to massive food waste that became increasingly difficult to justify. The final nail in the coffin came from changing passenger demographics. Modern cruisers tend to be early risers who prefer morning excursions over late-night dining. The party until dawn cruise culture that sustained midnight buffets simply evolved into something different. By 2010, most major lines had quietly phased them out, replacing them with simple late-night snack stations that cost a fraction to operate. Today's passengers have no idea what they're missing. Those towering ice sculptures, the artistic butter displays, the chocolate fountains surrounded by edible masterpieces, all gone. But that's just the beginning of what the cruise industry has buried in its past. Every morning on Carnival and Princess ships throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, passengers would wake up to find something magical by the pool deck. Overnight, skilled ice carvers had transformed massive blocks of frozen water into stunning works of art. Eagles with outstretched wings, elaborate ships complete with rigging details, dolphins that seem to leap from their frozen pedestals, and these masterpieces appear fresh every single day. The ice sculptors were true artists, many trained in culinary schools or recruited from high-end hotels. They worked through the night while passengers slept, using chainsaws, chisels, and specialized tools to create sculptures that would slowly melt throughout the day. Watching a detailed ice eagle gradually lose its sharp features as the Caribbean sun worked its magic became part of the cruise experience itself. But here's what made these sculptures even more special. They were completely temporary art. Unlike paintings or statues that could last forever, ice sculptures had expiration dates. Passengers knew they had maybe 8 hours to appreciate the artistry before tropical heat reduced it to a puddle. This created an urgency that made people actually stop and really look, at the incredible craftsmanship. The The tradition started disappearing around 2008, and the reasons were purely financial. A single ice sculptor's salary, plus the specialized tools and massive amounts of ice needed, could cost cruise lines over $200,000 per year per ship. When budget analysts calculated that most passengers barely glanced at the sculptures while rushing to breakfast, the math became impossible to justify. Cost-cutting executives argued that passengers were more interested in taking selfies with the sculptures than actually appreciating the artistry. They weren't entirely wrong, but they missed the point completely. These daily ice sculptures created a sense of wonder and anticipation. Passengers would genuinely look forward to seeing what appeared overnight, turning a simple walk to the pool into a moment of discovery. Today's cruise ships replaced ice sculptures with digital art displays and LED installations that cost less to maintain and never melt. They're technically more advanced, but they lack the soul of watching a master craftsman's work slowly return to water under the morning sun. The Instagram photos might look similar, but the experience, that magic, disappeared forever. And speaking of things that disappeared due to liability concerns, there's one cruise activity that was so thrilling and so dangerous that it's almost impossible to believe it ever existed. Yes, cruise ships once handed passengers actual firearms and encouraged them to shoot clay targets over the open ocean. Skeet shooting was a standard activity on many cruise lines through the 1980s and into the early 1990s, complete with trained instructors and dedicated shooting areas on the upper decks. Passengers would line up with shotguns, aim at clay discs launched over the water, and fire away while the ship sailed through international waters. The whole setup sounds insane by today's standards, but it made perfect sense at the time. Cruise ships were already in international waters where many firearm regulations didn't apply. The clay targets were biodegradable, so environmental concerns were minimal. And passengers absolutely loved the adrenaline rush of shooting skeet while watching the ocean horizon stretch endlessly in every direction. But the legal landscape was shifting beneath the cruise industry's feet. Maritime security regulations became increasingly strict throughout the 1990s, especially as international tensions rose. Having firearms on board, even for recreation, created a paperwork nightmare at every port. Different countries had wildly different laws about weapons, and cruise lines found themselves dealing with customs officials who weren't thrilled about guns crossing their borders. The final blow came from insurance companies. Liability coverage for firearms activities became prohibitively expensive, especially after several passengers were injured by recoil or flying shell casings. One incident involved a passenger who lost partial hearing from standing too close to another shooter. Another passenger on a different cruise suffered a shoulder injury from improper gun handling. These weren't catastrophic incidents, but they were expensive lawsuits waiting to happen. By the mid-1990s, cruise lines quietly retired their skeet shooting programs. The guns were locked away, the clay target launchers were dismantled, and those upper deck shooting areas were converted into more seating or observation decks. Today's passengers can enjoy rock climbing walls, surf simulators, and zip lines, but they'll never experience the unique thrill of firing a shotgun while sailing through the middle of the ocean. What replaced these high adrenaline activities were safer alternatives that still got hearts racing but didn't require weapons training or liability waivers. But skeet shooting wasn't the only environmentally questionable activity that cruise lines offered without a second thought. Picture standing on the stern of a cruise ship with a bucket of golf balls and a driver, taking aim at the endless expanse of ocean behind you. For decades, this was actually an organized activity. Cruise lines set up driving ranges on their back decks, complete with nets to catch wayward shots, and staff members encouraging passengers to let it rip into the sea. The balls that missed the nets, they just disappeared into the ship's wake, adding to what passengers jokingly called feeding the fish. The activity was wildly popular because it combined the satisfaction of a perfect golf swing with the unique experience of being hundreds of miles from land. Passengers loved the novelty of driving balls toward the horizon, watching them arc through salt air before splashing down in waters thousands of feet deep. Golf enthusiasts treated it like a bucket list experience. Where else could you literally drive balls into the middle of the ocean? But environmental scientists were quietly documenting a problem that cruise lines didn't want to acknowledge. Those biodegradable golf balls weren't breaking down nearly as fast as advertised. Ocean currents were carrying them to coastlines, where they washed up on beaches in alarming quantities. Marine biologists started finding golf balls in sea turtle stomachs and bird nests, creating a PR nightmare that cruise companies couldn't ignore. The real wake-up call came in the early 2000s when environmental groups began tracking exactly how many golf balls were ending up in the ocean. Conservative estimates suggested that cruise ships were dumping over 50,000 golf balls annually into marine ecosystems. Even the so-called fish food golf balls made from compressed fish meal were creating unnatural feeding patterns that disrupted local marine life. One by one, cruise lines quietly discontinued their ocean driving ranges. Some replaced them with simulator golf that used projection screens, while others simply converted the space into more seating areas. The nets came down, the golf ball buckets disappeared, and today's passengers have no idea that cruise ships once encouraged them to literally litter the ocean as a recreational activity. The environmental awakening didn't stop with golf balls, though. Cruise lines were also quietly eliminating spaces and services that had become too costly to maintain in an increasingly digital world. Walk onto any modern cruise ship and you'll find gyms, spas, casinos, and entertainment venues packed with the latest technology. But try to find a quiet library with actual books and you'll come up empty-handed. Yet, for decades, cruise ship libraries were sanctuaries of calm in the middle of the ocean. Elegant rooms lined with thousands of books, comfortable reading chairs positioned near large windows, and a peaceful atmosphere that felt worlds away from the party decks above. These weren't just token book collections either. Carnival, Princess, and Royal Caribbean maintained extensive libraries, with everything from best-selling novels to travel guides, maritime history, and even rare books about the destinations passengers were visiting. The library staff, often retired librarians who worked seasonal contracts, would host book clubs, reading hours for children, and quiet game tournaments like chess and backgammon. The reading rooms were designed as genuine escapes. Soft lighting, leather armchairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows created spaces where passengers could spend hours lost in a good book while watching the ocean roll by. These rooms had a timeless quality that made you forget you were on a floating resort packed with thousands of other passengers. But the digital revolution killed cruise ship libraries faster than almost any other traditional amenity. E-readers became mainstream around 2010, and passenger surveys showed that fewer than 5% of cruisers were using the physical libraries. Why carry heavy books when you could download hundreds of titles to a device that weighed less than a paperback? The economics became impossible to justify when those prime real estate spaces could be converted into revenue-generating venues. Carnival officially announced the removal of libraries from their ships in 2016, citing decreasing popularity and changing passenger preferences. The beautiful reading rooms were gutted and transformed into everything from additional bars to expanded gift shops. Royal Caribbean followed suit, converting most of their library spaces, internet cafes, and then eventually into more specialty dining venues as Wi-Fi improved throughout their fleets. The last holdouts were some of the older, smaller cruise lines that catered to more traditional passengers. But even they eventually succumbed to the pressure to maximize profitable square footage. Today's cruise passengers can access thousands of digital books through ship Wi-Fi, but they've lost something irreplaceable: the experience of discovering an unexpected book in a peaceful, beautiful space surrounded by nothing but ocean. And speaking of physical mementos from cruising's golden age, there's one souvenir tradition that passengers absolutely loved until technology made it completely obsolete. Remember when cruise ships had dedicated photographers stationed at every major location, capturing candid shots of passengers throughout their vacation? These weren't just formal dinner photos either. Cruise photographers were everywhere, boarding the ship, at the pool, during shore excursions, even waiting at the gangway when you returned from port. By the end of your cruise, hundreds of professional photos documented your entire vacation. The photo galleries were destinations in themselves. Passengers would crowd around massive display boards, scanning through hundreds of printed photos to find shots of their family. The excitement of discovering a perfect candid photo of yourself laughing at dinner or posing with friends by the pool was part of the cruise experience. You'd mark your favorites with sticky notes and head to the photo desk to purchase expensive packages that seemed worth every penny when you were caught up in vacation euphoria. But the real treasure was the cruise recap DVD. These professionally produced videos combine footage of your specific sailing with interviews from the captain, highlights from onboard entertainment, and sweeping shots of the ship visiting each port. They captured the entire voyage in a way that personal videos never could, complete with dramatic music and professional editing that made your vacation look like a Hollywood movie. The ship-on-a-stick photo became an iconic cruise souvenir, a professional shot of passengers posed in front of a miniature model of their ship. These cheesy but beloved keepsakes were displayed proudly in homes across America, serving as conversation starters that instantly identified you as someone who cruised. The photographers had the poses down to a science, positioning families just right to create that perfect vacation memory. Then smartphones killed the entire industry overnight. Why pay $50 for a professional photo package when everyone in your family had a camera in their pocket that took better pictures than the cruise photographers? Instagram stories replaced recap DVDs, and passengers started documenting their own vacations with more authenticity and creativity than any professional crew could match. The photo galleries emptied first, then the photographers were reassigned to other duties, and finally the entire photo department disappeared from most cruise lines. Today's passengers have thousands of vacation photos stored in their phones, but they've lost the magic of stumbling across a perfectly timed, professional shot they never knew was being taken. However, the most controversial change in cruise history had nothing to do with technology or safety. It was about adult freedoms that European cruise culture took for granted until American family values changed the game forever. On the uppermost decks of cruise ships throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, small signs warned passengers they were entering clothing optional or topless sunbathing areas. These secluded deck spaces, usually tucked away behind the main pool areas, were remnants of European cruise culture, where adult passengers could sunbathe without tan lines in designated areas away from families and children. The tradition made perfect sense on ships that primarily served European passengers, where topless sunbathing at beaches and resorts was completely normal. These weren't party areas or anything salacious. They were simply quiet sun decks, where adults could relax without worrying about tan lines or feeling constrained by swimwear. The areas were clearly marked, positioned away from main traffic, and strictly enforced as adults-only spaces. But as American cruise lines expanded and began targeting families with children, these adult-only areas became liability nightmares. American passengers complained about accidentally wandering into topless areas despite clear signage. Parents worried about their teenagers stumbling across these spaces even though they were intentionally isolated from family zones. The cultural clash between European relaxation and American modesty created constant friction. The cruise lines tried compromise solutions first. They moved the topless areas to even more remote locations, added extra signage, and stationed crew members as guards. Some ships created elaborate barriers and dedicated entrance points to ensure no one could accidentally wander in. But American cruise passengers simply weren't comfortable with the concept, regardless of how well these areas were segregated.
By the late 1990s, the topless sun decks had quietly disappeared from American cruise lines. The spaces were converted into additional seating areas, expanded pools, or more family-friendly activities. European cruise lines held onto the tradition longer, but even they eventually abandoned it as the industry became increasingly globalized and family-focused.
Today's cruise ships offer adult-only areas like Serenity decks and solarium spaces, but they come with strict dress codes and conservative policies. The European cruise culture that once celebrated adult relaxation has been completely sanitized for American family sensibilities, leaving modern passengers with no idea that cruise ships once offered clothing, optional experiences, in designated adult areas. Looking back at everything that's vanished from cruise ships, a pattern emerges. The industry has systematically eliminated anything that carried liability risk, required specialized labor, or didn't photograph well for social media. We've traded the artistry of ice sculptures for LED displays, the romance of midnight buffets for efficient grab-and-go stations, and the adult sophistication of earlier cruising for family-friendly entertainment that offends no one. Modern cruise ships are undoubtedly safer, more efficient, and more profitable than their predecessors. But they've also become more sterile, more predictable, and less magical. Today's passengers get bigger ships with more amenities, but they've lost the sense of adventure and sophistication that once made cruising feel truly special. The cruise industry's transformation mirrors broader cultural shifts towards safety, environmental consciousness, and digital convenience. These changes weren't arbitrary. They were responses to real problems, genuine safety concerns, and evolving passenger preferences. But something intangible disappeared along the way. The feeling that you were embarking on a genuine adventure rather than checking into a floating resort. So next time you're on a cruise ship, take a moment to imagine what those same decks looked like 30 years ago. Picture the ice sculptures melting in the morning sun, the elaborate midnight buffets that took hours to prepare, the quiet libraries where passengers discovered unexpected books while watching the ocean roll by. Remember that cruising was once riskier, more sophisticated, and infinitely more unpredictable. The golden age of cruising is gone forever, but at least now you know exactly what we lost along the way. What if I told you that someone is living their absolute dream life for just $30,000 a year, while people in assisted living are paying double that amount? Sounds incredible, right? Well, here's what the cruise industry doesn't want you to know about their so-called affordable paradise at sea. I've spent months digging into the real costs, hidden fees, and shocking truths behind this lifestyle that's being sold as the ultimate retirement hack. What I discovered will completely change how you think about cruise ship living. And trust me, it's not all sunset cocktails and endless buffets. The cruise lines are painting a picture of luxury living that costs less than your rent. But they're leaving out some pretty crucial details, like what happens when you get sick in the middle of the ocean, or why luxury residential ships keep promising launch dates they never meet, or the real reason most people who try this lifestyle give up within 2 years. But here's the thing that really got my attention. While everyone's talking about those feel-good success stories, there are people losing their life savings, getting stranded in foreign ports, and discovering that their dream retirement turned into a financial nightmare. And the cruise industry? They're staying surprisingly quiet about these stories. Let's start with those tempting headlines you've been seeing everywhere. The cruise industry loves to throw around numbers like $30,000 a year, making it sound like you can escape your mortgage and live like royalty on the open sea. But here's the first red flag nobody mentions. That $30,000 figure? It's based on a 3-year commitment to a single cruise line, and it assumes you're sharing a tiny interior cabin with someone else. The moment you want your own space, those costs nearly double. And if you actually want to see the ocean from your room, you're looking at closer to $50,000 annually. But wait, it gets more interesting. World cruise packages that everyone's raving about start at $48,499 per person, and that's just the beginning. Once you factor in the reality of cruise living, most people end up spending closer to $80,000 a year when all is said and done. Here's what they're not telling you about those affordable options. Victoria Cruise Line just announced they're launching full-time living options in July 2025 for $2,500 per month. Sounds reasonable until you read the fine print. That price requires a 2-year contract, doesn't include drinks, internet, or specialty dining. And get this, you can't leave the program without paying a massive penalty fee. The average person on a cruise ship spends $286 per day in 2025, according to industry statistics. That's over $100,000 a year just in daily expenses. Even if you're the most disciplined spender on Earth, those costs add up faster than you can imagine. But here's where it gets really sneaky. Those comp deals and loyalty programs that everyone talks about, they're designed to keep you trapped in a cycle of spending. You think you're getting free cruises, but you're actually prepaying for future trips at inflated prices. The cruise lines are basically using you as a free loan while making you feel like you're getting a deal. Now let's talk about the expenses that cruise lines conveniently forget to mention in their brochures. Port fees and taxes alone can add 10 to 20% to your base cruise fare. On a year-long adventure, that's an extra $8,000 to $16,000 that nobody saw coming. But that's nothing compared to what happens when you get sick. Let me tell you about Vincent Wasney, who went on what should have been a dream Royal Caribbean cruise with his wife in December 2022. He ended up with a medical emergency that cost him over $40,000 because cruise ship medical facilities aren't covered by your insurance, and they can basically charge whatever they want. Here's what really happens when you live on ships full-time. Your internet bill alone will run you about $1,500 per month if you need reliable connection for work or staying in touch with family. That specialty dining everyone raves about? Add another $1,000 per month if you want to eat anything decent. And laundry? Unless you're elite status on that specific cruise line, you're looking at $8 to $12 per load. But here's the kicker that nobody prepares you for. What happens when your ship breaks down, changes routes, or gets delayed for days? You're stuck. No refunds, no compensation, and if you miss connecting flights or have to extend your stay in a foreign port, that's all coming out of your pocket. Last year alone, there were over 300 significant cruise delays and cancellations that left passengers stranded. The cruise lines also don't mention that living on ships means you're subject to maritime law, which is completely different from the consumer protections you have on land. When something goes wrong, and trust me it will, you have almost no legal recourse. This is where things get really interesting. And by interesting, I mean borderline fraudulent. You've probably seen the glossy marketing for luxury residential cruise ships, where you can buy your own cabin and live permanently at sea. These projects promise the ultimate lifestyle, but here's what they don't want you to know. Take the Utopia project, for example. This was supposed to be a $1.1 billion residential ship that was originally ordered back in 2009. They've been pushing back the launch date for over 15 years now, and it's finally supposed to launch in 2025. But industry insiders are whispering that it's facing the same financial problems that have killed dozens of similar projects. Then there's the MV narrative, which is selling residences for anywhere from $875,000 to $8 million. $8 million for a cabin on a ship that doesn't even exist yet. But here's the really crazy part. People are actually buying these things based on nothing more than computer-generated images and promises. Want to know why these projects keep failing? It's simple math. Building and operating a residential ship costs about 3 times more than a regular cruise ship, but they can only charge residents a fraction of what they charge cruise passengers. The business model literally doesn't work, which is why we keep seeing these companies take people's deposits and then mysteriously go bankrupt right before launch. But here's what's really disturbing. When these projects fail, the buyers often lose everything because maritime law offers almost no protection for residential ship purchases. There's no FDIC insurance, no consumer protection agency, and often no way to get your money back. You're basically gambling your life savings on a floating fantasy that has a 90% failure rate. Now let's talk about something the cruise industry really doesn't want to discuss. What happens when you're living full-time on a floating city that operates outside the jurisdiction of any single country? The answer might surprise you, and not in a good way. Solo travelers, especially women, face unique challenges that go way beyond the usual safety concerns. When you're living on a ship for months at a time, you become a known quantity to the crew, other passengers, and unfortunately people with bad intentions. There have been multiple cases of long-term cruise residents being targeted for theft, harassment, and worse because predators know they can't just disappear into a crowd like regular passengers can. But here's where it gets really concerning. When you're in international waters, which is most of the time, the ship operates under the flag state's laws, not the laws of your home country. That means if something happens to you, the investigation and legal process might take place under completely different legal standards than you're used to. And cruise lines have teams of lawyers whose job is to minimize their liability not protect you. Medical care is another huge issue that nobody talks about, honestly. Ships have small medical facilities, but they're basically equipped for minor injuries and stabilizing patients until they can be airlifted or taken to port. If you have a serious ongoing health condition or need specialized care, you're completely out of luck. And as we mentioned earlier, the costs are astronomical and rarely covered by insurance. Here's something that really should concern anyone considering this lifestyle. Cruise ships regularly encounter severe weather, mechanical failures, and other emergencies that can leave you stranded for days or weeks. During Hurricane Ida in 2021, several cruise ships were stuck at sea for over a week, with passengers running out of medication and essential supplies. When you're living full-time on ships, these aren't just vacation inconveniences, they're life-threatening situations. This is where the cruise ship living dream really starts to fall apart, and it's something that almost no one talks about until it's too late. The psychological reality of living in a floating hotel with the same people for months on end is absolutely brutal, and most people are completely unprepared for it. Here's what actually happens when you're living this lifestyle. After about 6 weeks, what the industry calls cabin fever sets in hard. You start to feel trapped, claustrophobic, and desperate for privacy. Your tiny cabin, which seemed charming at first, becomes a prison cell. You can't escape the constant noise, the crowds, or the artificial environment. And unlike a regular vacation where you know there's an end date, when you're living this life full time, that feeling of being trapped becomes overwhelming. The social dynamics are even worse than you'd expect. You end up seeing the same faces every single day, eating meals with the same people, participating in the same activities. It sounds social and fun in theory, but in reality, it's like being stuck in a small town where you can never leave and everyone knows your business. Relationships become intense and toxic quickly because there's no escape from drama or conflict. Storage and personal space become major issues that nobody warns you about. You're living out of a suitcase forever. You can't have your own furniture, your own kitchen, or really any of the comforts that make a place feel like home. People who try this lifestyle often talk about feeling like they're camping permanently, which sounds fun for a week but becomes miserable after months. But here's the statistic that the cruise industry definitely doesn't advertise. Research shows that over 70% of people who attempt full-time cruise ship living give up within the first 2 years. The isolation, lack of control over your environment, and constant artificial stimulation become mentally exhausting. Many people report feeling depressed, anxious, and disconnected from real life after just a few months of this lifestyle. Despite everything I've just told you, there are people who actually make this lifestyle work long term. But they're not doing it the way the cruise lines advertise, and they definitely didn't stumble into it by accident. These people have figured out the system, and their strategies are completely different from what you'll hear in those feel-good YouTube videos. First, the successful long-term cruisers never, and I mean never, rely on a single cruise line. They play multiple loyalty programs against each other and constantly chase the best deals across different companies. They figured out that Princess, Holland America, and Celebrity have the best long-term living perks, while Royal Caribbean and Norwegian are better for short-term luxury experiences. Here's a secret that most people miss. The real money is in repositioning cruises and off-season bookings. These cruisers book cabins on ships that are moving between regions, which can cost 60 to 70% less than regular cruises. They also exploit seasonal pricing by spending summers in Alaska and Northern Europe, then winters in the Caribbean and South America, always chasing the cheapest routes. The tax situation is something nobody talks about openly, but it's crucial. These long-term cruisers often establish residency in states with no income tax, use mail forwarding services, and structure their finances to minimize tax obligations. Some even give up their U.S. residency entirely and become perpetual travelers to avoid taxes altogether. But here's the most important secret, and it's something that separates the successful long-term cruisers from everyone else. They never think of the ship as their home. They treat it as temporary transportation between destinations and maintain strong connections to land-based communities. They have backup plans, emergency funds, and exit strategies that they're constantly updating. Let me tell you about Margaret, a retired teacher from Ohio, who sold her house in 2023 to live the cruise ship dream. She lasted exactly 8 months before she had to move back in with her daughter, financially devastated and emotionally broken. Her story isn't unique, and it reveals the dark side that nobody wants to talk about. Margaret fell into what I call the sunk cost trap. She had invested so much money and emotion into making the lifestyle work that she kept throwing good money after bad, trying to fix problems that couldn't be fixed. When her health started declining and she needed regular medical care, the cruise ship lifestyle became impossible, but by then she had already spent her entire nest egg. Here's what really happens when people try to exit this lifestyle. They discover that they've basically burned all their bridges. They have no permanent address, no local community connections, no established healthcare providers, and often no furniture or household items because they sold everything before leaving. Starting over in your 60s or 70s after living at sea is incredibly difficult and expensive. The financial traps are even worse than you'd expect. People get addicted to the comp deals and loyalty programs, constantly chasing the next free cruise by spending more money. They end up in a cycle where they're essentially paying thousands of dollars for cruises that they think are free, and by the time they realize what's happening, they're too deep in debt to escape. But here's the really heartbreaking part. Many people who try this lifestyle end up more isolated than when they started. They lose touch with friends and family on land, struggle to maintain relationships across time zones, and discover that the shipboard friendships they thought were so meaningful disappear the moment someone leaves the cruise lifestyle. They end up elderly, alone, and financially ruined, with nowhere to go and no support system to fall back on.